The Renaissance was more than a period in history, it was a rebirth of the human spirit. After centuries of darkness, fear, and war, Europe awoke to a new light, a light of knowledge, art, and imagination. It was the age that changed everything, the way people thought, created, and saw themselves in the world. The word Renaissance means rebirth, and that is exactly what it was, the rebirth of curiosity, reason, and beauty. To understand the Renaissance, we must first look back to what came before. The Middle Ages were a time of survival and faith. Life revolved around the church, and questioning established beliefs was often forbidden. Knowledge was kept in the hands of a few. Yet beneath that surface, a quiet transformation was brewing. Trade routes expanded, cities grew, and people began to travel, exchange ideas, and challenge old traditions. When this growing curiosity finally burst into the open, it created one of the most remarkable periods in human history. The Renaissance began in Italy during the 14th century in cities like Florence, Venice, and Rome. These were places of wealth and culture, powered by trade and banking. Families like the Medici became patrons of art and learning, funding painters, sculptors, and thinkers. The Italian city-states were filled with competition, not only for power, but for beauty and brilliance. Each wanted to outshine the other with magnificent art, grand architecture, and dazzling innovation. One of the key sparks of this movement was the rediscovery of classical knowledge, the writings of ancient Greece and Rome. Scholars studied old manuscripts and began to think differently about humanity and the world. This new philosophy was called humanism, the belief that human beings were capable of reason, creativity, and greatness. Instead of focusing only on the afterlife, people began to explore the potential of life itself. The human mind, once restricted, began to soar, and with this new way of thinking came a flood of artistic genius. The names that define the Renaissance still inspire awe today. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, and Donatello. Leonardo, the true Renaissance man, painted The Last Supper and Mona Lisa, works that captured the depth of human emotion like never before. Michelangelo carved David from a block of marble, transforming stone into soul. Their works did not just decorate walls. They changed how humanity saw itself as something divine, creative, and limitless. But the Renaissance was not just about art, it was also an intellectual revolution. Scientists began to observe nature with new eyes. Copernicus challenged the belief that Earth was the center of the universe. Galileo built telescopes and proved that knowledge came not from authority, but from observation. The spirit of questioning grew stronger, leading to new discoveries in medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. The world, once bound by fear, began to open up. One invention in particular changed everything: the printing press. Created by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century. For the first time, books could be produced quickly and cheaply. Knowledge that was once trapped in monasteries now flowed freely among people. Ideas spread like wildfire across Europe, fueling education, debate, and creativity. Literacy grew, and the human voice grew stronger. The Renaissance also transformed politics, exploration, and religion. Leaders sought to expand their realms, not just through war, but through culture. Artists and scholars became as valuable as soldiers. Explorers like Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Ferdinand Magellan set out to discover new lands, connecting continents and transforming global trade. Meanwhile, thinkers like Martin Luther and Erasmus challenged the power of the Church, calling for reform and sparking the Reformation, a movement that changed the spiritual map of Europe. By the 16th century, the Renaissance spirit had spread far beyond Italy. In France, Germany, England, and Spain, new schools of art, architecture, and literature emerged. Writers like William Shakespeare brought the complexity of human emotion to the stage, while painters like Albrecht Dürer and El Greco carried Renaissance ideals into new forms. The movement had become a European phenomenon, a shared awakening that united the continent in creativity. What made the Renaissance so powerful was not just its discoveries, but its mindset. It reminded humanity that progress begins with curiosity, the courage to ask, "What if?" It taught the world that knowledge and beauty are not enemies of faith, but expressions of the same divine truth. And it proved that when people are free to think, create, and dream, they can transform the world. The Renaissance eventually gave way to new eras, the Enlightenment, the Scientific Revolution, and the Industrial Age, but its influence never faded. Every piece of modern art, every scientific breakthrough, every human achievement still carries a spark of that Renaissance fire. It was the age that changed everything, the moment humanity rediscovered its greatest power, the ability to imagine and build a better world. The Renaissance reminds us that progress begins in the mind, with a single thought, a single question, a single brushstroke. It was a time when the world remembered that life itself could be art, and that the greatest masterpiece ever created was the human spirit.